everybody, and welcome to the Sleep Matters podcast for dreams. Everything you need to know about how to get a great night's sleep and why it matters so much. I'm Dr. Pixie McKenna, and in this episode we're chatting about how important a set routine is for getting a good night's sleep. So today I'm joined by Issy Panayis, and Issy is actually an early morning presenter on Radio X. Welcome, Issy. I hope we're not keeping you up.
No, I've got enough sleep today, I'm all right.
So while it's dark outside the studio, she's chatting to the nation, literally in the middle of the night. And we also have Professor Kevin Morgan. Welcome, Kevin. And Kevin is a professor of psychology, and he's the director of the Clinical Sleep Research Unit at Loughborough University. So you definitely, Kevin, must have all the answers, please.
Hi, Pixie. I have some answers.
Did you have a good night's sleep last night?
I'm a complete phony. I sleep very well.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good, good. What about you, Issy? Well, I don't even know what your night is.
Neither do I most of the time. It can be a mixed bag depending on what I've been up to.
So what time are you getting up to go to work at?
I have a 2:25 alarm, which goes off every day.
2:25?
Yeah, in the morning.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
Most people are coming in from a night out at 2:25. So what's your routine? Because that is like... It just seems to have everything turned on its head.
I have a very solid routine. I think when you wake up at that time every day, which is a very unusual time to wake up, you have to have things in order and kind of eliminate certain things to be able to function to the best of your ability. Obviously, I have to go and do the show, and there's people who work far harder hours at far harder jobs than I do, and I kind of owe it to them to have the best possible routine and the best night's sleep so that I can do what I need to do for them and keep them going through the morning. So I can go to bed anywhere between 6 in the evening and about midnight. Obviously, in my line of work, being a broadcaster, being a music DJ, I have to go to quite a lot of gigs and that kind of thing, so you can't always guarantee you're going to have a lot of sleep. Sometimes it can be a couple of hours here and there. But yeah, my alarm goes off at 2:25, and then I get a cab into work. I'm by work just after 3 o'clock, and then the show finishes at 6:30, and then I go back to bed for a few hours after that, and usually wake up about midday.
Do you sleep in your clothes? Because that's what I'd be doing.
I do wear like quite a big jumper most of the time, so I can just get up, make breakfast, and not
just
even think about it.
How important, Kevin, I mean, with your experience, how important is routine and having a daily, I mean, Issy sounds like she's got a routine even though it's a bit wonky because she's getting up in the middle of her, her day is our night. But how important is a routine in terms of getting a good night's sleep?
No, this routine sounds like a routine, in as much as it's rhythmical and regular. Routines are important for sleep because sleep is a critical phase in that schedule of activities we call the 24-hour circadian rhythm. And what's important about routines is they provide us with signals, with cues. And these cues, if they operate well, they kind of tell us to down-regulate, to de-arouse, to go to bed, to go to sleep. And then they encourage us to wake up at a regular time. And it's this regularity of the routines that's important. The phrase we use to define these is a German word called Zeitgeber. But these are the time givers, the timekeepers of our circadian rhythm. If you maintain a regular circadian schedule, it protects those other circadian functions like sleep, like appetite, like your energy levels during the day.
But isn't there a problem, I guess, for Issy? Because Issy has a job 5 days a week that requires her to be up when everyone else is asleep. And then she's got a life, I'm presuming, at the weekend, which
bold
is...
presumption.
Yeah.
This is where what we call individual differences kicks in. Not everybody is the same. One size of circadian rhythm doesn't fit everybody. Some people have naturally flexible and robust circadian rhythms, and they select for some kinds of jobs. I mean, famously, postal delivery workers are very early morning people, but everybody can't be a postal delivery worker. And at times of full employment, these people are people who feel most comfortable. They kick off very early in the morning. Some people would die doing that job. Okay, so we tend to, in adulthood, select for those schedules and demands that best suit our endogenous circadian rhythms.
So is it possible, though, to train yourself to become...
Well, up to a point, yes. We talk about morning people and evening people, but that's...
Is that a thing, or is that just
it is a thing.
thing?
It's a pudding that's very easy to over-egg. Most people are neither one thing nor the other. About 20% of the population are quite categorically morning people. And some people are quite categorically evening people. And these people tend to have rather fixed circadian rhythms. Some people get up very early in the morning and they hit the ground running, and other people always feel uncomfortable getting out of bed before 8 o'clock in the morning. The rest of us, we're kind of moving around in the middle, and we're slightly more flexible. If the job demands us to delay our sleep phase, we can generally do that. Not excessively, but within limits. So most of us show flexibility, adaptability, and only a minority will say they have an absolute categorical preference for working into the night or working early in the morning.
But do you think, how is your weekend, for example? Do you sort of, wake up Saturday morning, or are you the last one to leave the nightclub, for example, on Friday night?
I guess it depends on what your plans are and what you're doing, but it can be quite tricky to work out, because when your body's so used to 5 days a week waking up at one time, sometimes I don't sleep the whole night through. My body naturally wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning because I think, right, we've got to get up, we've got to go and do things. And then it's my job to kind of turn my brain back off and be like, right, now we're going back to sleep now.
Can you go back to sleep? Do you find you go back to sleep?
If I wake up, I might be up for a couple of hours, but a lot of the time I am sleeping through the night. I think because my sleep is split, I'm able to and I'm used to going to bed in the evening, I can still get a full night's sleep a lot of the time at the weekend.
So actually we're sort of, maybe some of us are hardwired to be night owls versus...
Yeah. It's certainly the case that some of us are much more adapted to working night shifts. And as I said earlier, if all of the things being equal, if we're allowed to choose the jobs we do, those people who choose to do almost permanent night work are rather special people. And that they can survive. Some people couldn't countenance working any night shifts, let alone permanent night shifts. So there is a degree of selectivity here. But even that isn't constant, because what will then happen is natural human aging-related processes will kick in, and they tend to weaken this robustness in our circadian rhythm. So what holds in your younger years doesn't necessarily hold across lifespan.
And is it true that your circadian rhythms feel like your natural internal alarm clock, I guess? That's different, isn't it, when you're a teenager and when you're an adult, and obviously as you get older,
if you've ever tried
again.
to get an adolescent out of bed in the morning, Pixie, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
so why is
it changes
that?
dramatically.
Why do they want to sleep all the time?
There are several things going on here. One of them is that maturation, growing up, is a process that starts in infancy, where what we call the polyphasic organisation of sleep, these little cycles of waking, sleeping, eating, bawling, waking, sleeping, eating, bawling. Yeah, you remember that. They tend to decline, and the more natural adult biphasic rhythm kicks in. But the biphasic rhythm is dependent upon things like hormone levels, melatonin levels. There's a very important process in the morning called the cortisol awakening response. This is when cortisol levels increase substantially about 20-30 minutes after we wake up. And in part, they're driven by our circadian rhythms. We know that because if you just get people to nap and wake them up, they don't show this arousal response. So all of the things being equal, there's a lot of physiology keeping our circadian rhythms rhythmical. Now, many of these things change as we get older, and not just as we get old, but as we get older, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. So characteristically, as you move through early, middle, late adulthood, your sleep will invariably become shorter, lighter, and more fragmented. It's normal. It's what happens. And as you move towards later life, and if opportunities arise, sometimes polyphasic sleep returns, so the napping in the afternoon becomes quite acceptable, quite satisfying, maybe. For some of my students, napping in the afternoon is quite acceptable and satisfactory. But the question you asked me was why these things change as we get older. They change because everything else changes. And what also changes is the demands upon us. So, work routines provide excellent Zeitgebers, excellent timekeepers that keep our schedules firing off. But take those away in, say, post-retirement.
Right, and you haven't got
you
the...
have more flexibility to deploy.
So, therefore, routine is the key thing. And you sound like, Izzy, you've got a routine.
Yeah, it's fairly solid.
Is it like really like I'm out of bed, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and you've got a defined amount of time just to do it, get into work?
It's not like the kind of job you could just stroll in half an hour late or oversleep. You have to be there at that time. Otherwise, you get in big trouble. I won't have a job for very much longer. So, yeah, routine is massively important. Getting out of bed as quickly as you can, getting out of the house and being at work for 3 o'clock is something that I just have to do every day without question.
And did it take you a while to get into that? How long are you doing the job now?
Just over 2 years.
How long does it take you to get into the groove?
Quite a while. I think a lot of people say is you're not sure if you ever really get used to that routine because it's not natural to wake up in the middle of the night, but you have to do everything you possibly can to make it as natural for yourself as you can. So I think as you go on, and what I've realised over those 2 years is taking away external factors which can disturb your sleep. So I use earplugs because obviously if you've got neighbours, flatmates, whatever, building works, when you're doing shift work in the middle of the day is something that wakes me up a lot. So earplugs are a staple part of what I do in both blocks of my sleep. I have blackout blinds, I have a light up alarm, which is game changing if you do shift work. Get a light up alarm because it means that it's brilliant. It very gently wakes you up half an hour before, and by that point you're feeling quite awake and you haven't even realised there's no work on your part.
What do you think about that? Is that...
I think it is making some immensely valuable points, and I'll come back to this. We've been emphasising how different his routines are from, say, a normal day worker or whatever. But there's something they have in common. It's the discipline that looks after your sleep. It has got to be firing on all four if she's sitting in front of a microphone earning a living, okay? You can't fade, you've got to be on it, you've got to be processing information all the time. You've got to look after your level of arousal, and that means looking after your sleep. And what Izzy's just been describing is a very disciplined, if you like, intelligent way of managing sleep under adverse circumstances, but she's learned this is how it works. These are the things I've got to do in order for my sleep to function for me when I need it. Now that's a message that applies to all of us whenever we're working. Most of us in adulthood know what we've got to do in order to preserve and look after our sleep, and that's where schedules and routines are very important. We know what our natural bedtime is, we know the things we usually do before bedtime, we know the usual order of things that signal to our body time to start down-regulating, we're heading towards bed, okay, don't get excited now, start doing things that are quieter. And we also know that, there's come a time in the morning when we really ought to get up and start moving around. And maintaining a discipline around this looks after our sleep. And if you want an example of where this discipline falls over, just look at any family during the school holidays with school-age kids, and what happens if they're school-age kids in their teenage years and they don't have a job. They will phase advance. Bit by bit, the kids will start going to bed later and later and getting up later and later.
And they become feral.
And they become feral. Well, they will attract opprobrium, and they will be labelled lazy and all these things. And all they're really doing is they're moving their circadian rhythm bit by bit forward into the night, to a point where they actually can't get up any earlier. Yeah. Now, one of the really important rhythms underneath our circadian rhythm is our temperature rhythm. Temperature starts to fall off towards bedtime, and it reaches its lowest point maybe between 2 and 4 in the morning, after which we start getting warmer, just like lizards. So we operate at our peak when our bodies are nice and warm, okay? And what happens with kids during school holidays is that their whole circadian rhythm moves such that if you tried to get them up in first thing in the morning, they'd think it was the middle of the night. Right. They'd wonder what was going on here. They'd be like the Walking Dead. So what can you do? Well, you can either live with it, and the wonderful thing about teenage kids is they switch relatively quickly.
Right.
They can, when the school bell rings, they're back. But don't be surprised by this. This is what we would all do if those time givers, those sight givers, were removed from us in the morning and we were allowed to slip forward in our schedules. Unemployed people do this. Some retired people do this.
What is there, a set amount of time that we should sleep? We all kind of we should sleep 7 or 8 hours, and then there are all these other people who, famous people who've only slept 4 hours and they've changed the world.
Here's a rule for life, Pixie. There is no one-size-fits-all recommended amount of sleep that we should all aspire to. It just doesn't work like that. And most adults just know that intuitively. If you want to know what the answer to the question, how much sleep do I need, is, it's not a number, it's an experience, okay? The amount of sleep you need is the amount of sleep you require to allow you to wake up feeling reasonably refreshed, hit the day and meet its challenges, and then feel healthily sleepy towards the evening at what you identify as your normal bedtime, okay? Now, by and large, that would be a correct amount of sleep. Now, for some people, it might be 6-7 hours. For some people, it might be 8-9 hours, okay? About 45% of the population will sleep between 7 and 8 hours, okay? But, the people sleeping slightly more than that, slightly less than that, aren't abnormal people. That's just what they've learned is adequate for them. But keep in mind what I said earlier, that as we get older, that amount will decline. We will sleep less as we become older.
And what about the way Issy is doing it? So Issy, just remind me, you're doing a little bit
either side.
You're like a sandwich, like a sleep sandwich in between.
I like that.
Work.
So usually in blocks of around 4 hours, I'd say. It usually works about 8-9 hours. It can depend if I need to catch up on a bit more sleep from the week, if I've had some busy nights beforehand, but usually around that time.
So what's that doing to her circadian rhythms?
It's probably working well, given that the work demands when they're occurring, which is 2 till 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, so waking up just before 2:30, and then the show finishes just after 6:30.
Wonderful in the summer. It's probably adequate. If you want a good example of this, when Helen MacArthur was taking her yacht around the world, she was sleeping in these 2-hour cycles. You don't have a choice. You can't go to sleep. You wake up under a big boat. And by and large, this works quite well. Quantums of 2 seem to work extremely well. You can identify in adults a 90-minute cycle, a complete cycle of sleep. That's the one that starts with light sleep, moves into deep sleep, includes a REM period, a dreaming period of sleep, and then the cycle starts all over again. So periods of time long enough to accommodate 1 or 2 complete sleep cycles, dreaming cycles. This is healthy sleep.
What you were saying there about the blocks of sleep, because we hear that a lot, that actually we shouldn't be, I know what you say, you shouldn't even be thinking of hours or any time limit, but that when we are thinking about sleep, we should be trying to time ourselves into 90-minute cycles so that we wake up when we've completed a cycle rather than in the middle of the cycle, because otherwise we'd be exhausted.
Okay. I'll give you 2 examples of how you can use that one particular piece of sleep science to inform a sleep habit. Let's imagine you wanted to take a nap, okay? And I work with athletes who they do a lot of napping, athletes, okay?
Probably tired, I'd say.
Well, we'll come back to that. Possibly not. But anyway, they do a lot of napping. And the idea of what's an optimal nap, what's the best thing? And if you want to talk about power naps, I'll mention it now. There's no such thing as a power nap, okay? A power nap is a terminology invented by young people to make their napping, their sleeping during the day, seem more dynamic, okay? If you go around an old people's home in the afternoon, you'll see a lot of people napping, and somehow they're not allowed to be having power naps. Only young people can have power naps, but they're doing exactly what young people do when they're sleeping in libraries, okay? So they're just napping, okay? Daytime sleep is napping. The ideal daytime sleep could borrow from sleep science, and you say, well, what you don't want to do is sleep so long that you descend so deeply into sleep that shaking off sleep will create a problem. We call it sleep inertia, when you wake up maybe after an hour's nap and you feel heavy. So what's an ideal nap? Maybe 30, 40 minutes. You'll wake up feeling refreshed. You won't feel as if you're wearing a mantle of weight that you've got to shake off, and you will feel benefit. On the other hand, if you just put in a night shift, and let's imagine, Issy, you didn't have access to your full 4 hours. Let's imagine some family demand required your presence, okay? And this often happens on the first off period at the end of shifts. People trim. And you say, well, what would be the ideal sleep to have? Well, not less than 90 minutes. I'd say 2 hours sleep. 2 hours sleep, you could probably function quite well for well into the day on 2 hours of compensatory sleep, but not less. And this is just using what we know about sleep cycles and sleep science to inform basically sleep management strategies.
So it's give or take 2 hours. 2 hours.
If you want compensatory sleep, if you genuinely need sleep, go for a couple of hours sleep. If you really need sleep, go for a full night. Yeah. It's cheap enough. But if pressure demands that you need to a compensatory sleep prior to meeting some demand during the day, go for a couple of hours. Okay, but if you've really only got a small pocket of time and you just want a nap, you just want to recharge, go for half an hour to 40 minutes. No longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a junior doctor, I was actually a big fan of the power nap. I've countless times fell asleep on duty because I'm one of those old people who did terribly long shifts for days and days and days. You never knew when you were kind of going to finish. But we used to, if we had 10 minutes before we knew the next patient was coming in, we just lie down and go to sleep. And that 10 minutes, convinced ourselves that 10 minutes was gold, and it was, it would get us further through the night.
Probably
Obviously
would.
It was. Do you think? Yeah. Or was it just?
Yeah, I mean, one of the interesting things, we don't have these junior doctors to work on in research anymore, but
it's probably a good thing.
Pre the European Directive on working hours, the junior hospital doctors used to be able to allow us to make the point that it wasn't just the accumulated sleep that delivered restoration. So you could monitor a junior doctor's sleeping hours over 36 hours. And you say, look, they had 8 hours sleep, but they did have it in 27 different packets, and they feel wretched. So it made the point that it's not just accumulated added on time of sleep that really matters. It's the continuity of sleep that delivers real restoration.
Right. So 10 minutes, yeah.
Well, it's better than nothing, isn't it?
Issy, how do you find the seasons? I mean, that must affect you getting up in the really pitch black.
Seasons are massively affecting on sleep. The winter night shifts are the hardest bit of the entire year, and it's like Christmas at the moment because it's starting to get light out. We've just hit the spring equinox, and in the last couple of days I've left work and it's been light. It's like Christmas for presenters. We all go around, you see it's light outside the studios. That's massive, because leaving work and feeling part of the waking world is really important. You can feel very cut off when you wake up, it's dark, you go to bed and it's dark. And obviously I think we've all heard of seasonal affective disorder. That can massively come into play when all you see in your waking hours is darkness.
But is it a problem then when you leave work and it's bright and you kind of feel, well, what'll I do now?
It's great. You feel very giddy, but at the same time it takes adjusting to. You have to really check those blinds are in place, because I think the signals of it being light tells your brain, we should still be up, we should still keep doing things. So in the last couple of days since that's happened, I have had to adjust because my brain thinks, right, well, we should be up at this point. It's all about training yourself to do what you need to do.
What you were saying, just kind of getting regimented into it. So, Kevin, with this season, the seasons change, the dark, the light, the extra hour, the hour taken away, how is that affecting us? Tell us the science behind it, how that's affecting us.
Well, I can tell you the epidemiology behind it. What people actually do is they tend to go to bed slightly later, they get up slightly earlier. If you compare, I suppose the best example would be to compare a tropical country with Northern Europe. Within the tropics, very little happens throughout the year in terms of changes in sleep patterns. Sleep durations stay the same, bedtimes stay the same, getting up times tend to stay the same. In Northern Europe, and that would include us, Our sleep patterns do change. We do tend to go to bed slightly later. We do tend to get up slightly earlier. We also tend to drink more during the winter, during the summer, which actually has an impact as well. But we'll just park that for the time
Drink
being.
more alcohol.
Yeah. What I'm saying is that there are other things going on.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not living in a greenhouse. We're not plants. I mean, there's lots of things going on in our lives that change winter to summer. We tend to eat differently, we drink differently, we exercise differently. But by and large, and notwithstanding seasonal affective disorder and other affective disorders that Issy has just mentioned, sleep patterns change, but they change in a very manageable way. Okay. Mood changes are insidious. Mood changes will invariably affect sleep. It's very difficult to experience a mood change without it negatively impacting your sleep. And the further north you go in Europe, the higher the levels of seasonal affective disorder in the winter are. So that will carry with it lots of risk factors for insomnia. But by and large, throughout Northern Europe, insomnias tend to peak during winter months and tend to be less expressed during summer months.
Okay. So what are your top tips for getting a good sleep routine?
If you're going to manage your sleep and look after your sleep through your routines, then you first of all have to kind of appraise the quality of your sleep. And most adults know whether or not they've got fragile or robust sleep. And what I mean by that is that, if you've ever taken a test, caught an aeroplane, met a family crisis, you will know if your sleep wobbles or if it by and large fires for you, okay? If you know you've got wobbly sleep, then you really are going to have to look after your sleep routines to make sure that you get the quality of sleep you need, and that quality of sleep is preserved by those things you can adjust, and you can adjust your routines. And what you do, most people will know what they've got to do. Observing routines means just that. It means ritualizing certain activities, going to bed in roughly the same way on most nights. Make sure your sleep preferences, which we all have, are in place. Sleep is a highly ritualized environment. If you think about it, everything from the texture of our bedding to the height of our pillow to even the compass direction our bed is facing is important to some people. Whether the bedding is heavy or light, whether the window is open or closed, all these things matter. Some people can't sleep without a light on, not many, but some. So all of these things become our sleep preferences. Teddy, no Teddy, this kind of stuff. Having all that stuff in place is important. Making sure it's in place becomes important. Doing normal things in the normal way. I'll give you a good example of this. There's a relationship that many people assume between drinking milky stuff and getting a good night's sleep, okay? Now, the real story behind this is far more subtle but far more interesting. People who are accustomed to drinking half a pint of glicky milk before they go to bed mixed with whatever, okay, if that's their habit and that's what they believe helps their sleep, these people actually show signs of sleep disturbance if they're not allowed to do that. On the other hand, people who never do that, if you give them half a pint of milk with something mixed into it and say this is a sleep aid, you can measure sleep disturbance in those individuals. What we're looking at here is routine. It's the routine that matters, not the dietary addition of, can you imagine never having grown accustomed to drinking half a pint of milk before you go to bed, and somebody saying this is going to be really good for you? I mean, why would anybody believe that? But anyway,
you've ruined it for loads of people.
Well, it's routine. Now, most people intuitively know what is and what isn't in their routine. If it's a drink, if it's a cup of tea, fine. If it's not, that's fine too. There are no rules here about what should be in the routine, other than the routine should guarantee what we call de-arousal, quietening, calming as you move towards bedtime. And then if you really want to preserve your environment and you're beginning to feel that maybe sleep isn't always coming the way you want it to, try one single injunction, and that is just keep your bedroom for the things we do in bedrooms, sleeping and sex, and that's it. Don't take food, don't take the newspaper, don't take... Just do what's appropriate in a bedroom, okay? But if you sleep very well and you have no problems with your sleep and you're waking up shining and you always go to bed to read the paper, fine.
Right.
Does this make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you've got your, obviously, science, evidence-based hat on, speaking about sleep. Here we've got... She's living the dream, so to speak, up in the middle of the night, and you're doing it completely. You've turned it all on its head. How do you do it?
I think it's what we were saying before about eliminating those external factors. In my brain, I know this is what I have to do. This is my job. I love doing my job. I love going to work. It is the best job. So that helps. Having something great to wake up to is always going to make you want to get out of bed in that sense. For me, eliminating external factors, figuring out what's going to disturb your sleep, how you get the best night, be that having the best possible bedding for you, be it cutting down on caffeine. A lot of people will hate me for saying that, but I allow myself to have 1 cup of coffee when I get to work at 3 and no more for the rest of the day, because that really messes with my sleeping patterns. It's earplugs, it's blinds, it's whatever works for you, making sure that you know that routine is going to be in place for you.
So strict.
I don't think you need to be strict with it. I think for what I do, yes, there needs to be those things in place. I think I can get quite anxious if things aren't in the way they should be. So I lay my clothes out the night before, so it's not something I have to think about or worry about when I'm lying in bed. I know exactly what I'm going to have for breakfast every day, just to take away that choice, not to be hard on myself or to be strict with myself, but because I know that's going to make it easier for me and for my brain to function in the right way when I need to get up. I think when you do shift work and when you do the kind of job that I do, it's a very different thing to waking up naturally and getting those solid 8 hours in a row. I don't think other people need to be as hard on themselves.
And could you see yourself doing this, I mean, for a long period of time? You've obviously done it for a couple of years. There must be people there who've done it for years and years and years, I'm guessing. I mean, loads of people do shift work for their entire life.
Yeah, and some people were really happy doing that. I think what we were saying about morning people and night people, there's someone at my station who's been doing the same overnight show for 20 years now, and he's one of the most respected men in the industry, and I don't think that specialist music show would work at any other time. So, you know, it all has its part to play in that sense, I think.
It's funny, I never really thought about that so you at 3 o'clock in the morning have to be exactly what you're like at 3 p.m. You can't be like, oh yeah.
Maybe even, I would say even more so. More so. You have to be switched on.
You've got to keep everyone else going.
Yeah, and it's just me in that studio. I'm in control. The entire output of the radio station at that time is down to me.
Oh dear.
You've got to be on the ball.
But you love it.
Yeah, I do. It's a brilliant job.
So we've got to get a bit of routine. And we've got to be strict on ourselves to get a good night's sleep. Look at if we need naps are okay, but keep them to 40 minutes. If you need sleep rather than a quick nap, we're looking at a couple of hours, but not longer during the day. Do you think there's anything else, any other sort of, what would be your top take home?
Okay, it's interesting because we're focusing on sleep and routines in relation to sleep. We're kind of making the assumption that the only routine that matters in relation to sleep are routines around sleep, as if having a routine during the rest of the day really makes no difference. Of course, it makes an immense difference. Right. Your circadian rhythm is a 24-hour rhythm. So if you want to look after your routine, this really makes you boring, but it looks after your sleep. It means that your exercise routines are going to be routines. They're going to be rhythmical. It means that your meal times are going to be rhythmical. If you eat haphazardly, say, sometimes I eat a large meal at 6, sometimes at 9, this is going to play havoc with sleep routines because it's simply going to confuse your body. It's not going to know where it is in its phases. So by and large, the routines aren't just sleep related, although they're very important. They work throughout the 24 hours. Like I said, it doesn't make you interesting. There's flexibility in the system. There's what we call plasticity in the system. You're allowed to. You don't have to have time out now and again. But by and large, if you want to look after your biorhythms, you maintain regularity in your habits.
Okay.
End of.
Regular as clockwork. And for you, same thing, really, I guess. Routine.
Regimented.
Yeah. Good. Well, hopefully we're all going to sleep well tonight, I hope.
Thanks very much, Pixie.
Picked up a few tips. Thank you so much. It's been really fascinating to sort of, real life activity here, and obviously the science brain behind it all. Thank you for watching the Sleep Matters podcast from Dreams. If you enjoyed it, then please press the like button below. And if you want to see more, then you can subscribe to this series.